Good afternoon. I am Beth Shepard, and I am with the University of Florida, and I am here today with Rachel Mannon, and she is going to get us all started out. She is with Illinois, and we are excited to have you. So I'm going to let Rachel go ahead and get started, and here we go.
Hi everyone. Yeah, like she said, I'm Rachel Mannon. I'm a registered dietitian and I work in Illinois with the U of I. All right. So last time I was not on, but you guys talked about screening and medications for osteoporosis and for bone health. So if you guys have any questions about that, feel free to unmute yourself or just drop it in the chat and we can get those answered for you. Today, though, we're going to start talking about the nutrition for just overall proper nutrition as well as specifically for bone health. So we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition for the bones. Sorry, I lost my spot. So the nutrients on the left are vitamins and minerals that are important for building your bone health. Calcium, phosphorus, vitamin D, magnesium, and vitamin K. Hopefully you guys have all heard of those vitamins and minerals. So we will talk about each one more specifically here in a minute. So hopefully you've heard of dietary guidelines for Americans. They come out every 5 years. And they are just guidelines to help Americans with healthy eating. They're based off things that are going on in America to help decrease morbidities or chronic diseases, things like that. So there are key recommendations that come out that help with that. And then using My Plate as an example of what your plate should look like. Hopefully you have all seen My Plate before. It did replace what used to be the food pyramid. So a lot of people remember that with the pyramid and the different food groups in that. So if you notice, there's a lot of differences between the food pyramid and My Plate. But My Plate is a better visual on what your plate should look like. If you notice, half of the plate is fruits and vegetables. So hopefully your plate kind of looks like that every time you eat a meal. So we want to encourage you to meet nutritional needs by thinking food first. So you want to meet your calorie needs. You need food for not just calorie needs, but there's other reasons to have food as well. So you need to satisfy your nutrition requirements and good eating patterns. So these are common food groups and things within the food groups that Americans tend to need more of. So some of them are whole food groups like fruits and vegetables. Whole grains is part of the grain category. If you didn't know, half of your grains should be whole grains, which most Americans don't get that much, which is why whole grains is more of a focus on needing more of. And then dairy, Americans tend to not eat as much dairy as they need to. That's mostly important for bone health, which is why it's bolded. We're going to talk about that because it contains a lot of calcium and vitamin D. Seafood, legumes in place of meat and poultry, that's part of the protein group. We should be eating more of those meats and protein foods because they are good in unsaturated fats and have less of the saturated fats. And then replacing oils with more of the solid fats like butter and margarine. All right, so these are some nutrients that are concerned for public health. And they're all very important, but we're going to focus on calcium, vitamin D since they affect bone health. But of public health concern, there's also potassium and fiber on the list. And all of these nutrients are found in those food groups that I mentioned on the last slide that Americans tend to not eat enough of. All right, so first we're going to talk about calcium. Calcium is an essential nutrient. It is for muscle, it helps with muscle contraction and nerve function. And then it moves throughout the body so that it gets to all the nerves and muscles all throughout the body. And it also helps make up the hard structure of the bone. And that also contains phosphorus as well. So bones store 99% of the body's calcium. So calcium is very big for bones. You can also have too much calcium, which we'll talk about the intake recommendations here in the next couple of slides, which can lead to deposits in the kidneys and it could cause kidney stones. It can lead to impacted kidney function. And then it could also lead to skeletal structures in the bones as well. So when calcium is low, there's a hormone that signals the bone to break down and adds calcium to the blood. So if we don't have enough calcium, it's eating away our bones essentially. So we need calcium from food or supplements if you don't get enough through your food, because calcium stores build up only until we're at about 30. So once you're 30, your bones start to lose more calcium to maintain that blood calcium level. These are the calcium requirements based off age. And there at the bottom, it has the upper limit on the max that you should be consuming through food and supplements. So as you can see, when you're younger, the calcium intake is more, and then when you're older, it goes back up as well. And then the taller upper limit when you're when you're 19 to 50 is 2,500 milligrams, and when you're 51 and up is 2,000 milligrams. So if you exceed this upper limit, like I said, it can lead to health problems such as kidney stones, prostate cancer, constipation, buildup in your blood, decreased iron absorption, and things like that. So when deciding on your daily calcium intake, keep in mind that humans can only handle about 500 milligrams of calcium at a time. So make sure you're reading supplement labels if you take any vitamins, and then just try and spread out your calcium intake throughout the day. Don't only eat dairy at breakfast or only eat dairy at dinner. Try and spread out when you eat your calcium throughout the day. So how you can meet your calcium needs. One way is following the MyPlate recommendations of 3 cups per dairy a day. So if you don't like milk, you don't just have to drink milk. Yogurt and cheese are also dairy products. And then the MyPlate dairy equivalents are there as well. 1 cup of yogurt or 1.5 ounces of natural cheese or 2 ounces of processed cheese. When we are picking our dairy products, we want to try and choose low fat or fat-free to help meet our calorie needs and also help to limit our saturated fat intake. Adding dairy, so you can, if you don't like drinking milk, are plenty of other ways that you can add dairy to your diet. You can add milk to certain foods when you make them. When you get that fat-free or low-fat milk, it is mostly water. So adding it in place of water when you're making things like mac and cheese or oatmeal or coffee, using that to make those foods can help increase your dairy intake. And then you can also replace plain yogurt for sour cream, which also helps decrease your saturated fat intake and calorie intake as well. And you can use yogurt as a salad dressing, or making your own salad dressing. You can use it as a base for that. And then there's a lot of dairy products as well, like frozen desserts and chocolate milk. If you don't like regular milk, you could try chocolate milk. They also have strawberry milk now. So Just trying different things if you're not just a plain milk drinker. They also have milk alternatives for if you don't like, if you're a vegetarian or you are allergic to milk or you are lactose intolerant. A lot of those milk alternatives have added calcium in them, as well as just natural calcium. But just be aware that they may have added sugars, especially if they're flavored. So if you get vanilla soy milk, it might have more added sugars than just regular soy milk. And they usually add vitamin D to those as well. And then here is an example. So if we were in person, we would have you try 3 cheeses, but we are not in person. So this is just a graph that would show you, it has the same calcium no matter which type of cheese you're eating. But if you do the lower fat one, you're saving calories and you're saving then also how much total fat you're eating. It's a little higher in sodium, but not much. So just being aware of those changes, and then just trying different fat intakes of different cheeses and dairy products to see what you have a taste preference for. And then hopefully you all are familiar with this. This is a nutrition label. So what we're going to highlight here is the calcium on the nutrition labels. So the percent daily value is a way that we can calculate our how much calcium we're taking every day. The percent daily value is based off a 2,000 calorie diet. So for calcium, it's based off an intake of 1,300. So if your intake is a little lower than that, then your percentage would just be a little more than that. And then also noting the portion size. So for this, the serving size is 2/3 a cup. So if this is pasta and we were to have only eat 1/3 a cup, we'd want to take that in half because we only ate 1/3, so we only have half of the calcium. And then this is the calcium recommended. Oh, whoops. All right. This is the recommended intake with the percent daily value chart, just based off your age in your recommended intake. Okay. And then this is how you would calculate how much you would, your percent daily value. Instead of tracking how many milligrams you eat every day, you could just do it by the percent daily value. But then also noting that not all foods that have calcium have a nutrition label. For example, like your fresh fruits and vegetables, those don't have nutrition labels on them. So you would have to look that up and estimate how much calcium they have in them. But your other things that do have a nutrition label, you could just keep track of that. And how much you eat, and then add it all together, and you would theoretically want to get to 100%. And then Beth is going to take it away and dive into each food group specifically.
Now, can you go back 2 slides for me real quick though, Rachel?
Yes.
Go back one more. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to highlight this because when we were talking about the percentage that you're supposed to have, really hone in on your age, and where you are for the recommendations. And because we're not adding milligrams, right? That's not what we see in a lot of our labels. We're going to see the percentage. Just really take note of the percentage that you should be getting to, because I think that's going to really help you, or it just helps me when I start looking at it, that I don't have to transfer it to milligrams or any of that kind of stuff. It gives me the idea of what percentage I have just starting out. So if you go to the next one, if you have not taken the opportunity, I think I wrote it in the chat box at the very beginning, but I know there's a lot of chat that goes on at the beginning. If you have not done this, I would really encourage you, and I know there's a handout for it, but you don't have to have a handout for this. You can jot it on any paper and pen with a paper and pen or paper and pencil, however, or on your computer. I want you to just take a minute to write down what you ate yesterday, right? I'm not asking you to go back an entire week. I'm not asking you to figure out what you ate the day after we had class, right? Just figure out what you ate yesterday and write it down. I know I did this morning for myself, and I was writing it down, trying to figure out what I ate and where I may have fallen short or what I have done to add and ensure I had calcium in my diet for yesterday, because it kind of gives you a jumping off spot. Now, maybe yesterday wasn't a typical day. Maybe it was your birthday. You're like, oh, that wasn't a typical day for me. Then don't choose yesterday. I just figured it was the closest day that you could probably remember, because at least for me, that's how it goes. I cannot remember multiple days ago what I ate. So that gives you a way to start. And if you're looking at your labels and looking at the percent daily value, if you're only supposed to get to 77% or you're supposed to get to 100%, then that daily value percentage is going to be what you add to really figure out where you are for that day. All right. And then you can see if you're short or not, and then you can work to make that change. So if you could go to the next one, Rachel, because I am going to talk about calcium in the dairy group, right? We know there are five food groups in my plate, and every one of them has a food source of calcium, including foods and beverages from the dairy or milk group, which is one of the easiest ways for us to get calcium from your diet, as they contain, generally speaking, the highest levels of that mineral, right? And as you can see, you can get almost half of your recommended amount of calcium from having 1 cup of plain yogurt. So when you look at that, you're like, wow, that I can score, right? You're almost done, or you're halfway there, which is kind of a nice way to be. So if it's smoothie or having yogurt in the morning is easy for you, what a great way to start your day off, really getting that calcium going in a positive direction. If that's not where that works for you, then you might want to choose something else. And we'll talk about other options from other things. But I also want to say, if you're taking a calcium supplement and you're getting all your dairy at the same time in the morning, that may not be as beneficial. As Rachel talked about, 500 milligrams is about how much you can consume at one time. Your body really can absorb at one time. So if you may want to change where your calcium supplement is, or you may want to change when you're eating calcium during the day to try to even that out just a bit. So just think it through. Don't have to make all the changes at once. So let's go to the second group. Let's go to the grains group. So when it comes to the grains group, they're not naturally good sources of calcium, but you can purchase fortified cereals with added calcium, and fortified grains often contain other needed nutrients in addition to calcium, making them a better option than unfortified grains, right? So to get calcium as well as fiber from grain foods, you would choose flours, bread, cereals, crackers, pastas that are made with a fortified whole grain. So when you're looking at your products and you're looking for what you might choose to be beneficial, looking for those fortified grain products are going to help when it comes to calcium compared to unfortified grains, right? So just thinking that through. All right, let's move on to the next group, which is our vegetable group. Vegetables can be great sources of calcium. The dark leafy greens provide calcium and other bone-building nutrients such as vitamin K. So this is a great thing to add if you're not getting enough of this, of green vegetables in your diet. Certain vegetables are better sources of calcium than others due to the level of oxalates they contain. So if you've not heard of oxalates, right? Oxalates bind to calcium, making it unavailable for us to absorb. So when you're looking at that and thinking about that, you're like, okay, now I got to also pay attention to how much oxalates are in different vegetables, right? This is where eating a variety is really, really beneficial, because then you don't have to worry about just getting things from one food. Spinach is an example. It has a good amount of calcium, but it's not necessarily a good source of the mineral because of its high oxalate content compared to other collard and other greens. Since collard greens, kale, and broccoli have a lower oxalate content than spinach, the calcium they contain is more bioavailable, right? So it's kind of like, what do I need to get my bang for my buck, right? I've always been a broccoli fan. So broccoli and cheese is one of those things that I love to have, but obviously collards are much higher on that group. I'm still going to add spinach to my smoothies. I'm still going to add spinach to my salads because it brings in a lot of other things, but it's not my main source of getting my calcium from spinach at this point, right? So just kind of pay attention to those things as you're doing it. Rhubarb and sweet potatoes also have high levels of oxalate, which makes me sad. I love rhubarb. Cooking or soaking vegetables can decrease the oxalate content, making that calcium more available, but it does not do it by much. So don't expect that to be the one thing that really saves you and gets you to have, you can just eat it all you want, and that's your calcium substitute, right? Or not substitute, your calcium, where you're getting your calcium from. Love getting older. Food words escape me some days. All right, so let's move on to fruits. One way you can increase calcium in your diet is to drink calcium fortified orange juice. 8 ounces of regular orange juice has about 2.5% of your daily recommendation for calcium and no vitamin D. While 8 ounces of calcium fortified orange juice has about 35% of the daily value for calcium, right? So you can see the big difference when they fortify these foods. Some orange juice has vitamin D added as well. And I always think of calcium and vitamin D as really, really good friends. And so I try to get those together. Reading the labels and choosing an orange juice fortified with both calcium and vitamin D would be a great choice. But you can see, if you have kumquats, which may or may not be available to you, you can see what a great source of calcium those would be naturally without being fortified as well. Figs are a great option as well. I love to have those as my dessert because they're nice and sweet. So I can always add that for dessert in the evening and really get that calcium going at a different time of the day. So I'm going to move on to the protein group. So certain protein foods can also be great sources of calcium. Canned salmon actually contains the bones, which contribute highly to the calcium content. The bones in canned salmon are brittle and very crushable, often going unnoticed. If you prepare recipes such as salmon croquettes with canned salmon, crush the bones with a spoon or a potato masher. And I have to tell you, this is one of the things that I've done, and I did it today. I make salads for my whole week, and I used to always have chicken as, chicken salad, not a chicken salad, but salad with chicken on top. I have, for a couple of weeks now, I have changed that to either salmon, canned salmon with bones, and I just crush it up, or even sardines, and I add those to the top of my salad because I know that's going to be significantly more calcium for me, and it's an easy way to get it in the middle of the day, and not really change my routine or my taste up that much. So that works for me. It may work for you. If not, you may figure out something else. But sardines, which is not really on this list, but sardines are really, really high and that they're 325 milligrams too. So sometimes I do sardines. And if you need an excuse to eat pizza, get those sardines on there. There's anchovies, and we might have a better reason or excuse to eat pizza. Tofu that is fortified with calcium can provide a big chunk of your calcium needs as well. Tofu is a great substitute for meat that provides fiber and protein, as well as calcium. And lots of healthful recipes using tofu are available in cookbooks and online. And of course, depending on what you prepare it with, it takes on that flavor. So it really helps, isn't something easy to add that you'll usually like. Even beans have calcium, although many contain oxalates, and soaking and rinsing beans prior to cooking can reduce those oxalates and make calcium more bioavailable, but not necessarily in the same amounts as you might like. I don't know if you saw anything on there of protein foods that look good to you, but I want you to really think about different ways you can get protein can help you increase your calcium content in your diet. Let's move to the next one. When we talk about information on nutrient content, there's a lot of different things you can find on the web. We all know this. So one of the ones that we would encourage you to look at is right there on USDA Food Data Central. It has that database that provides nutritional content for many foods available in the US. So if you're wondering about the calcium content of a food that does not have a food label, like fruits and vegetables, you can always find its content by accessing the USDA Food Data Central website. So remember I asked you to do this. I would encourage you to go ahead and write that down, whether you're doing the percentage or whether you're figuring out your calcium. We're not going to spend lots of time on it today, but this is a good way for you to look at ways to add calcium to your diet if you feel like you're not getting enough, or ways to look at what you're currently doing and what you need to add as we move forward. All right, I'm going to keep moving and head to phosphorus. So phosphorus is the other major structural component of bone tissue besides calcium. Like calcium, a lot of body's phosphorus is contained in the bone matrix. Now, although blood concentration of phosphorus is not as tightly regulated as calcium, the diet plays a major role in the homeostasis or balance of phosphorus in your body. So often, high blood concentrations of phosphorus are due to high intakes of inorganic phosphate additives found in processed foods. All right, let's head to the next one. So the recommended dietary allowance for adults is 700 milligrams per day. Phosphorus is found naturally in many foods, including milk and cheese. These natural sources of phosphorus are only absorb about 60%. On the other hand, inorganic phosphates found in processed foods and cola beverages are 100% absorbed. So consuming too much of these foods and beverages can upset the proper ratio of calcium to phosphorus, which adversely affects bone health. This is one reason why it's important to limit your intake of processed foods and colas as much as you can. So sometimes when we look at a little is good, lot is better, not always the case when we are messing with the balance right there. So we're going to move on to vitamin D. Vitamin D has been in the news over the last several years, with a lot of headlines about its importance for health. This is an area of much research, and we can expect to see more headlines over the coming years. What we do know for sure is that vitamin D is important to bone health because it helps the body absorb calcium from food when calcium intake is low. So in the body, vitamin D gets activated in a two-step process, starting in the liver and then in the kidney. It is the activated form that travels to the intestinal cells and stimulates specific proteins called cobindins to absorb calcium. People who live in sunny and more in regions closer to the equator can get vitamin D from the sun, and they tend to have a better vitamin D status than people in overcast and more northern regions. So when considering sun exposure for vitamin D, it is important to balance the need for this vitamin with the potential for increased skin cancer risk, right? So 15 minutes in Alaska in the sun is probably not the same as 15 minutes in Florida in the sun, right? So just kind of pay attention to what you need and what you're supposed to be getting. So 15 minutes a day in the sun without sunscreen is a good rule of thumb when considering getting some of your vitamin D requirement from sun exposure without harming your skin. If you're concerned about your vitamin D status, make sure you ask your healthcare provider for a blood test to check your levels, because that definitely can happen. Let's move to the next slide. How much vitamin D do people need? Well, children and adults up to age 70 need 600 IU or international units, or 15 micrograms per day. Over age 70, the recommendation is 800 IUs or 20 micrograms per day. This recommendation assumes minimal sun exposure. Most people do get vitamin D through exposure to sunlight, but not everyone gets the same amount of sun or synthesizes the same amount of vitamin D for the same exposures. These are general recommendations. You may want to ask your healthcare provider if they have any individual recommendations. So factors that affect sun synthesis of vitamin D or its hormone after sun exposure include age, less efficient conversion with older age, skin color. Persons with dark skin, including tan skin, don't absorb sunlight as well. Health. People who have kidney or liver disease may not convert vitamin D to its active hormone form. So there's lots of things that can affect your ability to absorb vitamin D from the sun. So let's talk about food sources on the next slide. and supplements that are fortified foods and supplements are the best sources or most consistent sources of vitamin D because it is limited in food. Certain fatty fish, such as salmon, mackerel, and trout, are good sources of vitamin D, but few other foods naturally contain this vitamin. So aim to include these foods in sufficient sun exposure and consider a vitamin D supplement to help meet your needs. Of course, we always want you to speak with your healthcare provider if you're considering or starting taking a vitamin D supplement. Let's move to the next slide. Magnesium. So we don't always hear a lot about magnesium in the news or different places, I think mostly in commercials. Magnesium is important for bone health, although the exact mechanism is unclear. Magnesium lies on the outer surface of bone tissue and it promotes bone formation. Studies are still happening and are inconclusive as far as the cause and effect relationship of magnesium deficiency and weak bones. Generally speaking, though, research studies do show that the higher intake of magnesium is associated with greater bone strength. The recommended dietary allowance is 420 milligrams per day for men and 320 for women. You can find magnesium in whole grains, nuts, and green vegetables. So no excuse. Whole grains and vegetables are on your menu as we talk about what our dietary needs would be. Next, we're going to move to vitamin K. Vitamin K is not commonly associated with bone health, but it is necessary for two bone-promoting proteins. One protein helps integrate calcium into bone tissue, and the other promotes bone synthesis. Vitamin K deficiency can have a negative effect on bones because of its role as a cofactor for these two proteins. The recommended dietary allowance for vitamin K is 90 micrograms per day. Vitamin K is available in dark green leafy vegetables such as kale, collard greens, Swiss chard, and in broccoli. All the things that we talked about before that are high in calcium, but also in avocados, kiwis, grapes, and herbs such as cilantro and parsley. It is also found in some cheese, meats, fish, and fermented foods like yogurt, sour cream, and other condiments. And sauerkraut, which is another favorite of mine. Vitamin K is important for blood clotting. People who are on blood thinning medications may need to watch their consumption of vitamin K rich foods. So if this could be an issue for you, that is when you need to talk to your healthcare provider to make sure it doesn't become an issue. Next slide. So overall, what you've heard is the food is the best way to get the nutrients that we're looking for. Having a variety of foods in your diet is a great way to ensure that you're getting the nutrients needed. A balanced diet that promotes a healthy weight may provide additional benefits to protect against osteoporosis as well. I think we may have taken out the other, but I want to talk about it real quick, if I remember correctly. One of the other handouts that would be in your session is let's work on balance with yoga. And I really just want to say a couple of things about it because we're not all together. And I can't make sure that everybody's safe or in a safe place to do some of these yoga poses. And it's not that you have to do yoga, but we do want to work on balance, right? We were talking about a balance in our food, balance in our daily lives. We're all working towards that balance. Well, one of the things we really need to work on is balance and not falling. So when we talk about balance with yoga, it is a great way to focus, pay attention to it. I think I told Wendy probably almost a year ago now, we were talking about yoga and different poses. And one was like the tree pose. And one was maybe the chair pose or the eagle pose, but I think it was the tree pose. The tree pose is one where usually you have your hands like this, but you put one leg on your inner thigh and just kind of stand on one foot. It doesn't really matter to me if it's on your thigh, inside of your thigh, or if you're just holding it up. But I always told Wendy, I was like, that's what I do when I'm brushing my teeth. I have the counter right there. I can grab the counter if I need to, but it helps me remember to do that pose. It helps me remember to focus on my balance, right? So whether it is the mountain pose that you're doing, or if it's the tree pose, And if you're going to lift your leg and you're worried about it, go to a hallway where you have two walls that are close to you so you can make sure and hold on if you need to. But working on that balance is so important, not just for your bone health as it is, but also for ensuring you are working on balance, because it is just like exercising. It is something we can improve and get better at as we keep aging. So instead of feeling like things are declining, which I feel like almost every day, this is a way to feel like I'm getting better at different things. And balance is one of those that I work on all the time.
Beth, I also wanted to mention real quickly,
Mhm.
if check in your areas and your different states, because sometimes there'll be some of the extension offices do offer the program Strong People, or sometimes it's called Strong Bones. And with that particular program, they do a section on balance. They do a little bit with stretching and then strength training. So it's a really great program in order to maintain independence as we get older, as well as just being able to catch yourself if you do fall. But just wanted to throw that out there. So again, it's called Strong People, Strong Bones. It was developed by Dr. Miriam Nelson at Tufts.
And I think our office, our county has one that's Better Bones, and they do it all at the community centers across our county. So I usually try to do the classes on nutrition, and they do the classes on the other. So those are all great opportunities. And thank you, Wendy, for bringing that up. I think that's great. Rachel, do we have a next slide? All right. So what are your bone building steps this week, right? What are you going to do to increase your calcium intake for the week? Any barriers that you have, anything that you can overcome as you're thinking of it? I had someone tell me it was a great suggestion when they wrote it on theirs. They were like, I'm going to add chia seeds to my salads because there's a lot of calcium in that, and it alter my taste, and it's a great way for me to get it in some more calcium in. So think of different ways that you can add it that aren't really hard to do, because those things that we can easily slip into our lifestyle are more likely those things that we're going to keep doing multiple times, right? And make that a good habit change. All right, as you're writing those down, yes, please set a weekly goal, because we all know if we don't set a goal, it's really, really hard to do it until we get back to class next week, and you're like, oh, I forgot I was supposed to do that. All right, so please set those weekly goals. Please type them in the chat. We're happy to see them. It may give somebody else a great idea of what they can do. Maybe their brain is just not working today, or it's just not coming up with a good strategy. So if you can share it, it gives people a lot of opportunity to think of, or maybe share in that same goal. Rachel, do we have another slide? All right, in summary, a healthful diet is the best way to get those nutrients you need for strong bones and for overall health. To improve your diet, eat more vegetables, fruits, whole grains, dairy, seafood, and legumes. Avoid those solid fats, added sugars, and salt. So an easy way to meet your calcium needs is to follow the MyPlate recommendations for dairy, which is 3 cups a day. Other calcium sources included those fortified cereals, fortified orange juice, leafy greens, and canned salmon. Consuming too much phosphorus from processed foods and beverages can upset that proper ratio of calcium to phosphorus, which will adversely affect bone health. 15 minutes a day in the sun is a good rule when considering getting some of your vitamin D without harming your skin. Fortified foods and supplements are the best sources of vitamin D because it's limited in foods. And eating whole grains, nuts, and green vegetables, fruits, fish, and cheese will help you obtain enough magnesium and vitamin K for your bone health. And then, of course, you're going to round that off with some yoga poses that may help you to achieve better balance. With that being said, if there's any questions that we need to cover from both the chat, or please feel free to write some questions in the chat if you haven't already done them. We're happy to help. And I'm going to ask Wendy or Virginia, either one, if we had any questions that we need to still answer. I know you guys have been diligently answering questions in the chat.
Amber's going to take it away. So Amber, any questions we missed?
I don't think so. I've kind of been keeping an eye on the Q&A and the chat and trying to answer the questions as they've come in. So if anybody needs more clarification on any of the answers, feel free to let us know, but we'll see if anybody else has anything else to add.